Welcome to Pub Sports Radio's NFL Futures Show. Today we are breaking down the NFC North Division, and we start with your favorites. And when I say favorites, I think they should be even bigger favorites. And when I see the Packers at minus 150 to win the division, I legitimately think, do we open shit up and make a big bet on this? And I can't wait to hear your breakdown. But that is the first thing that jumps out at me. Do we make a big bet on this? And what keeps me from making big bets is an injury to the quarterback. But here we might have a backup who could keep it rolling. Now, maybe I'm getting a little too far on Love at this point, but let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. 2020 record 13-3, 12th hardest schedule in the league based on opposition forecasted wins. To make the playoffs minus 220, to miss the playoffs plus 170. Regular season wins at 10.5. The overs at minus 130, the under at plus 100. To win the division, minus 150. To win the conference, plus 600. To win the Super Bowl, plus 1,300. This is year 3 for LaFleur as head coach. Offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, also in year 3 with the West Coast offense. And we have Joe Barry coming in, the new defensive coordinator, using a 3-4 scheme. Key acquisitions: Randall Cobb comes back after 2 seasons abroad, back to where he started his career. Eric Stokes picked in the first round, 29th overall, cornerback out of Georgia. Josh Myers in round 2, 62nd overall, a center, and is expected to start in an interior line spot. Amari Rodgers, round 3, 85 overall out of Clemson. They traded up to draft him. Kylan Hill, a running back out of Mississippi State, in round 7, 256th overall, and Devondre Campbell, inside linebacker from the Cardinals. They lose Jamal Williams to the Lions. We'll be speaking about him when we talk about Detroit, but of course it opens up the spot for A.J. Dillon, who late in the season sure looked like he deserved an opportunity. They lose Corey Linsley, all-pro center. They lose him to the Chargers. There were cap issues for these Packers. Aaron Rodgers' future was in question all offseason. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it immensely. I enjoyed the Packers fans very scared that they weren't going to have Rodgers behind center. But for one more season, at least, he will be there. The reigning MVP skipped all offseason team activities, but he was right there participating in the first day of training camp, coming off a year where he set career highs in touchdown passes with 48, completion percentage 70.7%, 121.5 passer rating. That was 1 point shy off the NFL record he set in 2011, the first year that he won MVP. He's entering his 3rd season with LaFleur. He gets every skill player back from last season, and he gets several new options. Devontae Adams coming off a monster season with 1,374 yards, 18 touchdowns. Robert Tonyan had a giant breakout season, 11 touchdowns. Alan Lazard, Marquez Valdez-Scantling can catch. They can also block. They're very good blockers. They trade up to draft Amari Rodgers. 77 passes he caught for 1,020 yards, 7 touchdowns in the senior year at Clemson. Cobb returns. Devin Funchess returns after opting out of the 2020 season. That's a lot of weapons at Rodgers' disposal. Aaron Jones signs a 4-year, $48 million extension, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, 30 touchdowns over his last 30 games. He'll be paired up with A.J. Dillon. So that's all wonderful, but there are serious questions about the front line. How are they going to replace Corey Linsley? Is David Bakhtiari capable of making it through a whole season healthy? Will he even be available for week 1? This Packers defense finished top 10 in yards allowed for the first time since 2010, but from week 12 through the NFC Championship game, they were much better, allowing just 20 points per game, 25 sacks, 9 picks over those 8 games. They have 5 first-round picks on defense, all under the age of 25. Jair Alexander is a monster, maybe the best corner in the league. Their problem is pressure. Can they get enough pressure? Will they get enough pressure on the opposing quarterback? 2016 first-rounder Kenny Clark coming off an injury-plagued season. Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, the edge rushers, both regressed. 2019 first-round pick safety Darnell Savage, 2019 12th overall pick linebacker Rashawn Gary are expected to carry a heavy load, but those are issues. Offensive line questionable. Can they get enough pressure on the quarterback? Those are two key elements of a good football team. And they're big question marks here. Babano, take it away. Green Bay Packers, NFC North.
This is one of those teams where I've got basically a divergent opinion on them, split opinion, if you will. I think in the division they're playing in, they're still leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else in this division. But I kind of feel like it's going to be a Green Bay team that maybe beats up on an NFC North where Detroit's got question marks and flaws. Minnesota's got question marks and flaws. Chicago has question marks and flaws. And they do win the division, and I think they will. But when it comes to playoff time and a step up in class happens for this team, and they're playing some of the best teams in the conference, I don't know if this is a team that's capable of winning in the playoffs, even with Aaron Rodgers. To me, there's just too many question marks, up and down this roster right now. Aaron Rodgers is back for one more year, perhaps his last year with the Packers. We know the discontentment that he has with the management group is very, very real. The management group, I think, is trying to capitulate, if you will, to Rodgers. They bring back, you mentioned it, Randall Cobb, someone that Rodgers always liked when he was with this team years ago, had great chemistry, throwing the football to him. Now, I know this is now Randall Cobb years later, a little older, maybe not quite the player he once was, but he's still going to be someone that Rodgers will count on. It's still a nice ad based on the fit and the history that Rodgers and Cobb have had. They drafted Amari Rodgers out of Clemson in the third round. And to me, that's a critical area for Green Bay. The receiving core had to address it because, look, I like Robert Tonyan. I like Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Alan Lazard, but I'm sort of looking at them from just a pure talent standpoint and ceiling and how high their ceiling is. If Aaron Rodgers or some other quarterback outside of Aaron Rodgers was throwing them the football, I'm not sure they'd be anywhere close to the quality of receivers and targets they've been here in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. That's the issue. Other than Devontae Adams, they haven't had that bona fide, receiver with great height, great speed, ability to separate from one-on-one coverage. That's been the bone of contention for Rodgers. So, they bring in Cobb, see if he can get the most again out of Tonyan, the tight end, and also Lazard and Valdez-Scantling. And, of course, Devontae Adams. It goes without saying how good him and Rodgers, that connection has been. So I don't mind the receiving core. I do have issues with the O-line, Jimmy. I've got major concerns. Corey Linsley was a massive loss. He's one of the top players in the league at that position, the center position, which anchors that offensive line. Lane Taylor is gone as well. Ricky Wagner is gone. Two more offensive line starters from last year. And and making matters worse too, the Pro Bowl left tackle, he's been a great lineman for years with this team. David Bakhtiari is coming off a torn ACL. He may not be ready for week one. Is he going to get through a full season? And is he going to be able to play at his best coming off what is one of the most significant and catastrophic injuries any player or athlete could face? There's legitimate question marks there for Bakhtiari's effectiveness coming off that kind of injury, a torn ACL. So the blocking in the middle also concerns me. Aaron Jones, they gave him a ton of money, and I'm worried that this is going to be him just completely besieged by this offensive line and the struggles they might have to open up holes for him to run the football. I think there's legit concerns that I have that they may not be able to do that this year. So the offensive line is a huge, huge concern for me, massive for the Packers. Now, to your point that they're minus 150 to win the division, this division has still got so many teams that I've got major concerns about that they could still win this division. But to me, this is not a Super Bowl caliber offensive line right now. We'll have to see if Matt LaFleur can get that group to that kind of level as the season goes on. But right now, they don't look that way along the offensive line. As far as the defense is concerned, Kevin King he basically almost single-handedly lost Green Bay the NFC Championship game last year against Tampa Bay. His cornerback coverage was brutal. And unfortunately, they've had struggles to try to find that number 2 corner to play with Jair Alexander. That's been the issue. So they're going to hope Eric Stokes is that guy. They drafted him out of Georgia. He's got height. He's got that ability in contested throws, contested footballs down the field. He can win those one-on-one battles, those jump ball situations. And they're going to he should be an upgrade. It's not going to be difficult, I think, to be an upgrade from Kevin King. They're going to hope Eric Stokes is that for them. I like Amos, the safety. He's good. So secondary, if Stokes comes in there and plays well, that secondary could be pretty solid for Green Bay. And certainly he's got to be better than King was at times last year. You mentioned the pass rush, not good enough last year. the law firm of Smith and Smith's got to step up. They were good a couple years ago, but Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, their numbers declined last year. That bothers me a lot. Need to do a better job getting that pass rush. Rashawn Gary's going to have to play a part in that as well. I think the linebacking core is awful this year for Green Bay. I think it's the weakest part of this defense. I mean, you're going to go with basically guys like Kamal Martin, Chris Barnes, unproven commodities. So the pass rush is going to, I think, middle of the field for if you're into fantasy football, Jimmy, you got to look at maybe putting tight ends in your lineup this year when they play Green Bay, because I think they're going to struggle to cover over the middle of the field. There's going to be opposing tight ends that maybe feast on that Packers weakness at the linebacking position. So something to remember for when the games start. I'm not betting the over 10.5. I just, with so many questions on both sides of the ball, we know there's no questions at quarterback, but with so many question marks on both sides of the football, even though this is an easier division, even though I got concerns about the Lions, the Bears, and the Vikings, which we'll get to, I just don't feel confident and rushing to bet over 10.5 wins. They could be an 11-6 or better team. I'm just not ready to bet that, especially with the Bakhtiari stuff. That's so critical to have him on the field healthy and effective. And I'm questioning whether that's going to be the case throughout the course of the entire 17-game season. I think the better bet, Jimmy, is the division, minus 150 than the win total. Because I could see them winning this division just by default. It's not that I love the Packers right now on paper, but by default, they still should win this division, even with the questions they've got. So minus 150, it's not a bet I'm making, but I wouldn't talk anyone out of it. Minus 150 to win the division. As far as the NFC and the Super Bowl futures, I'm passing. I don't think they're winning the Super Bowl. I don't even think they're winning the NFC.
I agree there. But when you saw that line come out, because I didn't think we'd get better than minus 200 for the Packers to win the division. Is that a red flag that it's minus 152? Is that give you a thought that, whoa, maybe maybe they aren't a shoe-in to win the division?
They really should. But here's the thing. With Minnesota, we'll get to them. We'll save most of it for them. But, there's still talent on that team. Daniil Hunter didn't play all last year. It should help the defense. The defense got some things to like about that Minnesota team. The offensive line concerned Cousins, of course, and low vaccination rates on the team. Those are all concerns with them. Detroit, new coach, that's going to be the Chicago's the team, I think, Jimmy, that I get concerned about when it comes to Green Bay winning the division, because I think if we see Justin Fields earlier than expected, I think there's going to be a chance for the Bears to maybe be a solid team in this division. Again, a big if, but that's the team that would worry me a little bit if I'm Green Bay. I still think Green Bay wins this division. It's just a question of value. Some people think minus 150, great value to win a division. I look at it and say, I think Buffalo's a great value to win their division. I think Cleveland's a great value to win their division. And I'm getting better numbers with teams I feel stronger about than Green Bay. So that's the reason I'm passing on the bet to win the division.
And right now at Bet365, where we're taking our odds from for this show, the Bills are the same, minus 150 to win the division. Let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings 2020 record, 7-9, 14th easiest schedule in the league based on opposition forecasted wins. To make the playoffs, they are plus 120. To miss the playoffs, minus 160. Regular season wins at 8.5, heavily juiced to the over at minus 150, under at plus 120. To win the division at plus 250. To win the NFC at plus 2,000. To win the Super Bowl at plus 4,000. Zimmer in his 8th year as head coach. Clint Kubiak, his first year as offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinators Andre Patterson, Adam Zimmer in year 2 with their 4-3 scheme. Key acquisitions start with Christian Darrisaw, offensive tackle, number 23 out of Virginia Tech, considered one of the top 3 offensive tackles in the 2021 draft. Kellen Mond, quarterback, Texas A&M, round 3, number 66 overall. Mackenzie Alexander, a cornerback they get from the Bengals, and coming back to a system where he's comfortable with. Patrick Peterson, cornerback from the Cardinals, adds big veteran presence. And Xavier Woods, a safety from the Cowboys. Key losses, Kyle Rudolph over to the Giants. Mike Hughes, a cornerback, to the Chiefs, and Anthony Harris, safety, is off to the Eagles. He had 104 tackles in 2020. This looks to be a vastly improved group this year. Vikings offense looked extremely dangerous last year. That was never a question, and that was, well, maybe you could say it was a question when they went 1-5 to open the year, but they look very good overall. Cousins threw for a career high 35 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson, rookie record with 1,400 receiving yards. Adam Thielen caught 14 touchdowns for 925 yards. Dalvin Cook rushes for 1,557 yards, 16 touchdowns. But that 1-5 start was ugly. Cousins threw for 11 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. You bring up the vaccination situation for the group. He's one of them that is not vaccinated, and that will rear its ugly head at some point, probably this season. Their O-line was a glaring weakness last year. They tried to rebuild it through the draft. We talked about Darisaw, 23rd overall. Then they get Wyatt Davis in the 3rd round out of Ohio State. Right tackle Brian O'Neill, 2nd-round pick in 2018, looks to be a tackle that they can really trust. Center Garrett Bradbury, a 1st-rounder in 2019. There are questions about being big enough. They've stuck with him through his whole career. Their defense completely fell apart last year. 29th in the league in points allowed. Zimmer called it the worst defense that he had ever coached. In 2020, they lost their top 3 cornerbacks to free agency, and they couldn't replace them. 2018 first-round pick Mike Hughes was bad, traded away in the offseason. 2020 first-rounder Jeff Gladney was even worse before he caught a felony assault and was cut. The only cornerback who played well was Cameron Dantzler. Cameron Dantzler played well, 3rd-round pick in 2019. So they went out. Patrick Peterson, Brashard Breeland, Mackenzie Alexander, Xavier Woods. They bring in all these guys who will help fortify that secondary. Their pass rush was nowhere to be found in 2020, just 23 sacks. Daniel Hunter, who you spoke of, 29 sacks in 2018 and 19, missed all of 2020, and they were just never able to replace him. Michael Pierce was expected to be that guy, but he opted out in 2020. In the offseason, Minnesota signed lineman Dalvin Tomlinson and Stephen Weatherly. They don't get sacks. They don't get a pressure on the quarterback. Now they stop the run. They're capable of stopping the run. They need healthy seasons from Anthony Barr. 14 games he missed last year, the 4-time Pro Bowler. They need a healthy season out of Eric Kendricks, who is looking, he was having a Pro Bowl season until he got hurt. A lot of question marks on this Vikings team, but they should be able to score. But Bono, take it away here. Minnesota Vikings, NFC North.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to improve a lot on defense, but on paper they look a little bit better. And, the offense does look solid, but the more I see the preseason go on, I'm worried about that offense. I'm worried about this team overall. To the point now where one of the win totals I made in the last week or two, just seeing things progress here, seeing how things are going on the field, see how Mike Zimmer's talking about the disappointment and how upset he is that players are just not hearing him about getting the COVID-19 vaccine and how it's sort of creating a ripple effect inside the locker room. That can't be a good thing. Can't be a good thing for a team like Minnesota where you've got people on different side of the fence. You can say everybody's up to their own personal beliefs when it comes to the vaccines. But from a team perspective, you're trying to win a Super Bowl. You're trying to improve on what was a dismal season last year. And you're trying to think, well, if we want to be the best team we can be, we got to have all our players on the field every week. And how are we going to ensure that? We get the vaccine, or at least it's going to give us our best chance to have everybody on the field. And unfortunately, you got people on different sides of the fence when it comes to that. I don't think that's the greatest thing for locker room camaraderie. Mike Zimmer's already throwing his hands up in the air and vocalizing publicly that he's frustrated. And he said, I'm done talking about it. But clearly he's still pissed off with what's going on with that situation. That's not a good thing in my mind coming into this season. But I am on the Vikings under their win total of 8.5, especially with they can get a plus price on that on the under. I don't see the market improvement. Kirk Cousins, I don't buy him being a great quarterback to win those clutch games. He's a stat patter when they're down big or when they're up big, but he's not one of those guys that's going to put that drive together, when you need it. That's an issue. The offensive line's a concern for me a little bit coming into the year. Yeah, they drafted Davis. But you look at the offensive line, Riley Reef, the left tackle, left in free agency, gone to the Cincinnati Bengals. So that's exactly why they went after Darisaw in the draft. And look, he might be very good, but I've also heard toughness questions have been raised about him. Work ethic questions have been raised about him. And this is the guy that you're going to be looking at to protect the blind side potentially of Kirk Cousins this year. And there's people, questioning a little bit about what they're going to get from Darisaw. So that's an issue. And Kirk Cousins is a statue back there. If that left side is compromised one bit, that offense is not working. Simple as that. And with that left side of the O-line being, I like Brian O'Neill. You mentioned him. He's a great O-lineman, but he's on the right side. I don't mind, Ezra Cleveland, some of these other guys, Bradbury, the center, although they've been average so far. That was big draft capital that the Vikings used on both Bradbury and Ezra Cleveland. They've got to be better. They've been average players so far on that O-line. They got to be better. But the left side is an issue. And I'll say this right now, Jimmy. Kirk Cousins gets injured. You aren't winning a thing this year with Jake Browning, who's been the biggest bet against quarterback for me going back to his days at Washington in college football, or a rookie in Kellen Mond. That's where you turn to at quarterback if something happens to Kirk Cousins. There's nothing there for Minnesota. There's nothing there that you can win with, bottom line. So I've got major issues there with that whole offense. I love the skill position talent. Jefferson, you meant Dalvin Cook, of course. If he stays healthy, he's a great running back. They bring in Dede Westbrook at wide receiver. Adam Thielen. Irv Smith Jr. is the reason why they parted ways with Kyle Rudolph, because they think he can be the new starting tight end, be very good. I like the skill position weapons, but if you have a shaky O-line and you have a statue quarterback who can't evade a pass rush, how are you going to get the ball to those weapons? That's the question. On defense, yeah, it was brutal last year. Mike Zimmer was not sugarcoating it when he said it was the worst defense I've ever coached. It's because it was fact. It was truth. It was the worst defense he's ever coached. It was awful. They went above and beyond to try to fix it. Harrison Smith back. Eric Kendricks, that's where the season went off the rails for Minnesota defensively. Eric Kendricks was, you're right, on his way to the Pro Bowl, gets injured last year, and there's not a lot at the linebacker spot around him. And that's going to be the concern. You better hope Chaz Surratt comes in and does something out of North Carolina. I think he's going to be a good player. I think he's got a lot of things you like. He can pass rush the quarterback. He can drop back in coverage as well. He's a versatile linebacker, but again, rookie. Talented, but can Chaz Surratt help out Kendricks? Because they need more than Kendricks at the linebacker spot. The secondary, that I couldn't believe how bad the secondary was last year for this Minnesota team. They've had to address that. We'll see if they've done that. I don't like the Patrick Peterson acquisition, to be honest with you. The guy's coming off his worst year ever, and I'm not sure it's going to get better for him here in Minnesota. So there's still a lot of questions with the defense as well. Have they improved in some spots? Yeah. The defensive line's still pretty decent. I don't like the linebacker spot unless Surratt steps up outside of Kendricks. The secondary still a gigantic question mark. You're putting your eggs in the basket of Patrick Peterson and Mackenzie Alexander, who both had down years last year. That's the issue I've got. The schedule's not easy whatsoever for the Vikings. I don't like the vibe with the locker room right now with the vaccination rates being low. 6-10 ATS last year, 7-9 straight up. With this win total, you got to guarantee me that they win 2 more games than they did last year. I'm not sold on that. I think they stay under 8.5.
Wow, I love the breakdown, and plus 120 on the under 8.5 right now. Ooh-wee. Very, very interesting. All right, let's move on to the Chicago Bears. 11th hardest schedule in the league based on opposition forecasted wins. To make the playoffs, plus 170. To miss the playoffs, minus 220. Regular season wins at 7.5, slightly juiced to the under. To win the NFC North, plus 450. To win the NFC, plus 2,500. To win the Super Bowl, 50-1, plus 5,000. Matt Nagy in his 4th year. Offensive coordinator Bill Lazor in his 1st year. And then Sean Desai also 3-4 scheme in his 1st year. So new offensive coordinators. Key acquisitions, we start with Justin Fields. We might be the long-term answer here for the Bears, 11th overall for Ohio State. They bring in Andy Dalton. They give him $10 million for 1 season. He looks to begin the season as their starter. The faster they get to Fields, the better. Damian Williams comes in from the Chiefs. Desmond Trufant from the Lions. 15 appearances in his last 2 seasons. He's been not very good. Key losses. I don't know if this is fair to call him a key loss, but Mitchell Trubisky is at the top of that list. Cordero Patterson, Anthony Miller, wide receiver, over to the Texans, Patterson to the Falcons, Kyle Fuller over to the Broncos, and that is a big loss. So the Mitch Trubisky era is over and a failure. The front office moves on by signing Dalton and drafting Fields. The offensive line did not do a good job of protecting Trubisky. They draft Tevin Jenkins in the second round out of Oklahoma State. Looks to fix that. Now we have a back injury that will require surgery, and they look to be in big trouble on the offensive line again this year. With no depth to speak of, they just signed 39-year-old future Hall of Famer Jason Peters to help fill this void left by Jenkins. James Daniels' return should help the interior, who missed almost all of last year with a torn pectoral. But they have playmakers on offense. Allen Robinson is clearly the real deal. Had a great 2019. Followed that up with 102 catches for 1,250 yards in 2020. Darnell Mooney caught 61 passes for 631 yards. Cole Kmet, Jimmy Graham, strong 1-2 punch at tight end. They have dangerous pass-catching backs in Montgomery, Tariq Cohen, and Damian Williams. Montgomery got to be a 3-down back last year for the Bears after they lost Tariq for a season-ending ACL tear in week 3. Montgomery rushed for 1,070 yards, 8 touchdowns. He caught 54 passes for 438 yards. Damian Williams comes in from the Chiefs. He played for Bill Lazor in 2014 and 15 with the Dolphins, so there's some continuity there for those two. Nagy will return to calling the offensive plays this year. He ceded his job last season after that awful start. Then we get to the defense. The heady days when Vic Fangio was running the ship are gone. I mean, they just seem to be getting worse and worse. Chuck Pagano retired in the offseason, and Sean Desai, the safeties coach, now is the defensive coordinator, and he worked under Fangio from 2015 to 2018. They released Kyle Fuller, their best quarterback. A lot of that had to do with salary cap issues. Jalen Johnson last year in his rookie campaign looked good. You know, he'll shoulder more of the load. Does Trufant have gas left in the tank? I don't know. They get Eddie Goldman back. The nose tackle, he opted out in 2020 due to COVID-19 concerns. That should be a big help. Then you reunite Goldman with Akeem Hicks. That should really help up front. Khalil Mack seems to be slowing down, but it might just be our expectations of him are too high. 9 sacks last year, 1 interception. Robert Quinn was a huge disappointment. They need a bounce-back season out of him. And 2018 first-rounder Roquan Smith led the team in tackles. Looks to be coming into his own. The defense has to step up in a big way if this team is to accomplish anything this year. But, Bono, do you think this team is capable of accomplishing big things in 2021?
Right now, the defense looks ahead of the offense coming into this season right now for this Chicago Bears team. That's the way I see it. I think there's at least pieces in place on defense where you're going to see, and look, for the Bears at times last year, we didn't recognize this defense. It's not a Chicago Bears defense the way they were getting torched at times, especially the back half of the season. That's why they went over the total so much. You remember, they started cashing overs down the stretch because suddenly the offense was moving the ball, but the defense was getting ripped apart every single week. When I look at this team, I think on paper, they're the team. If I had to say if someone's going to be a threat to Green Bay in this division, I think it's Chicago. But boy, there are still a lot of things that I worry about, especially on offense. We'll start there. Andy Dalton's going to begin the year as the starting quarterback. He'll play week 1 against the Rams. How long he's the starting quarterback, we don't know. Is he going to play a game or two? Is he going to play the first month? Is he going to play the first half of the season? Or I'd be shocked if he plays the full season. Is that a possibility? We don't know. What I do know is that there's a lot of people upset, right? Rightfully so. They see Andy Dalton's just a stopgap. Why are we wasting time doing this? Why are we not putting our rookie first-round pick, Justin Fields, at quarterback right away? Here's why you're not doing that. The offensive line is brutal right now for the Chicago. I don't know how much more I can emphasize that. They look like a horrendous offensive line, and the preseason hasn't helped matters in that regard. So until you shore things up along the offensive line, I honestly don't know if you could look yourself in the mirror if you're Matt Nagy and say, I've got to put my rookie quarterback against the LA Rams in week 1 or any team in the month of September behind this sieve offensive line that can't run block, that can't pass protect. It's not giving quarterbacks any time to fire the football down the field and find open receivers. That's why I think you're going to Dalton. And I think that's actually why I think it makes sense to at least start the season with Andy Dalton, because the offensive line has to improve before you put Fields in there with that group. Simple as that. I don't like what I see from that O-line at all coming into this year. It's a big-time question mark. The blocking has been declining the last 2 years, and you're looking at Tevin Jenkins, Elijah Wilkinson. You have no clue how good they're going to be, and they haven't looked good so far. The interior, question marks there. An offensive line that, as I mentioned, has been beaten up. It's a big, big worry for me because as good as Justin Fields might be, he's still a rookie. He still hasn't played a snap in an NFL regular season game. And if you're going to put him, and he does have the mobility to survive it, but the offensive line, I don't think you want to put him in that spot with the O-line being this bad. I do like some of the skill position talent, Jimmy, there. I like the running back group. That's a great running back room that they've got with David Montgomery, with bringing in David Williams, Tariq Cohen. Matt Nagy should lose his play calling duties if he doesn't commit to Dalton or Fields, Dalton to begin the year, obviously, dumping the ball off to the running backs. They're all capable of catching the ball. They're all very good pass-catching running backs, all three of those guys, Montgomery, Williams, and Tariq Cohen. There is no excuse for Matt Nagy not to run a bunch of screens. Take the pressure off that bad O-line, take the pressure off on the immobile Andy Dalton, and let the running backs do their thing in space. Take some pressure off them. But I don't know if Matt Nagy's smart enough to figure that out, honestly, because we just saw a preseason game over the weekend, Bears and Bills, and there I'm seeing Mitchell Trubisky slice and dice Chicago, and Brian Daboll, who is one of the best offensive coordinators in the NFL, do more with Mitchell Trubisky in one half of a preseason football game than the Chicago Bears got from Mitchell Trubisky in 2 years plus, with Matt Nagy calling plays. So that's why I don't trust Matt Nagy to make the right decisions and scheme and play call. You got a bad O-line. You got an immobile quarterback. You should be at least dumping the ball, create some havoc, at least pressure off the O-line so that you don't have to have the 4-step, 5-step drop backs every time. But are we going to see? That's the question mark. The receiving core looks competent. There are definitely weapons there when you look at it, led by Allen Robinson. I think Cole Kmet's going to have a nice year, potentially. I think he came on strong last year. Usually the second-year rookie or the second-year tight end, usually the rookie tight ends struggle a bit, get better as the season goes on. Then year two, they make that big leap forward. I think you're going to see that from Cole Kmet. I think he'll have a nice year. But, boy, the O-line is just a big worry, and if Andy Dalton's an even bigger worry playing behind a bad offensive line. The defense, that's where I think there's some hope. They did lose Kyle Fuller. Again, that bad, decisions with contracts and money, so they couldn't keep Kyle Fuller. And the rest of the cornerback group does concern me. I mean, that's the biggest worry for the defense is that secondary. I'm not sold on Desmond Trufant, Jalen Johnson being a good starting cornerback duo. Not one bit. They both had bad years last year. There's not a lot behind them. I like, the fact that they're going to have Eddie Jackson. The safety group's good. Jackson and Gibson are good players, and Jackson is really good at that position. I think the front seven could be the strength of the defense, and maybe the strength of the team overall. Khalil Mack, I know he's 30 now, but he's still a very, very top-tier edge rusher. Robert Quinn's the key, for me. If they can get Robert Quinn of 2019, nearly 12 sacks instead of 2 last year, that defensive line could be one of the better ones in the NFL, honestly. But Quinn, was that a drop-off that was a one-year anomaly, or was it a sign of things to come? Is this going to be a permanent decline now for Quinn? We're talking about a guy that's 31 years old now. It's not a given that he's going to bounce back and play like he did in 2019 now that he's in his 30s. So that's something to watch for. Because if Quinn can provide that, complementary impact along the front, pass rush wise with Mack, boy, it's going to help them out. Eddie Goldman, you mentioned it, didn't play due to COVID-19 last year. Now that he's back, he's going to be terrific in terms of stuff in the run, inside that nose tackle spot, the interior of that defensive front, and along with Akeem Hicks and Nichols, that's a good group. When you look at it, Roquan Smith stepped up and had a really nice year last year, so I look for good things from him once again. So I think the defense, linebacker, up front, that front seven could be good, and they better be good. The secondary still got issues. I think this is a team that's going to play under the total, game to game, early in the year. Play some unders. It's going to be a struggle, I think, for the offense with a suspect O-line, with Andy Dalton at quarterback. I just don't see them putting up points in bunches, especially when they play a team that's got a solid front seven. But I do think there's some hope for the defense. Win total, I'm passing. I just don't want to bet an over win total, Jimmy, not knowing how many games we're going to see Andy Dalton at quarterback. And I just can't bet an over 7.5 with Andy Dalton at quarterback with a bad O-line. Simple as that. So I'm passing on the win total. Didn't bet it under, didn't bet it over. But more than anything, game totals with Chicago might be in some lower scoring games, might be in some unders.
Great breakdown there. It's awful for Bears fans who would benefit from a weak offensive line. Aaron Donald, week 1, destroying their starting quarterback and creating a spot where we get.
It does sound like a recipe for disaster when you put it that way in week 1, yeah.
But then we get Fields in there, and the earlier you get Fields, the better. I mean, they're a very tricky cap, and made even trickier when they lose their first round pick, who was supposed to solidify everything, to back surgery. And they're a mess. Let's move on to the Detroit Lions. And I start smiling right away. I love historically bad teams. I love it. I love teams that keep losing and angering their fans. I love the history of that. It's enjoyable to be around. And when you're around Detroit Lions fans, they're hilarious. They are a funny group, and they have to be because of the state of their football team and the gift of the 4th toughest schedule in the league based on opposition forecasted wins, coming off a 5-11 season. To make the playoffs plus $600, to miss the playoffs minus 1,000. Regular season wins at 5.5, heavily juiced to the under. Over at plus 165, under at minus 200. To win the NFC North, 22-1. To win the NFC, 50-1. And to win the Super Bowl, 125-1. Dan Campbell in his first year at the helm. First year is all around. Anthony Lynn gets a job immediately as offensive coordinator. And Aaron Glenn, 3-4 scheme as defensive coordinator. Here comes Jared Goff. And the way they restructured his contract, he's going to be there for a couple of years. They didn't draft a quarterback when they could have. Tyrell Williams, they get wide receiver from the Raiders. We don't know how good he's going to be or could be. He missed all of 2020 with that torn labrum. Brashard Perryman, who is another guy who could be good if he could stay on the field, but we haven't seen him stay on the field for an entire season in 5 years. Jamal Williams, they get from the Packers. He's going to help DeAndre Swift carry the load. That's a nice pickup. They lose Stafford, their leader in almost every passing stat, after 12 years. Kenny Golladay goes to the Giants. Marvin Jones goes to the Jaguars. And Kerryon Johnson over to the Eagles. So it's a complete overhaul. Brad Holmes, their new GM, got a lot for Matthew Stafford. He got Goff. He got 2 future first-round picks and a third-round pick in 2021. That's more than I thought they would get, in all honesty. I was impressed with the haul that Brad Holmes got. Detroit did not draft a quarterback, as I said. Only Tom Brady has more wins than Goff among NFL quarterbacks since 2017. I hope he's ready to turn the corner, and I hope he's not used to those W's. Second-year running back DeAndre Swift, I mean, he's going to be needed to take the pressure off of Goff. 10 TDs, was 4th among all NFL rookies. He rushed for 521 yards. He caught for 357 yards and showed a lot of potential. Now he's got Jamal Williams beside him, or backing him up. It's a nice spot. And they will have an excellent line to work behind. They have the league's highest paid center in Frank Ragnow. 7th overall pick, Penny Sewell, who is the unanimous All-American at Oregon, was awarded the Outland and Morris trophies as a sophomore in 2019, and then he opted out of the 2020 year, so we didn't see him. But if 2019 was any indication, this guy's going to be an absolute monster. So he joins 2016 first-round pick and the anchor, Taylor Decker. They join last year's high-priced free agent, Halapoulivaati Vaitai, who's supposed to be shifting to right guard. Left guard, Jonah Jackson. That's a very good group. That's a very good group and will help everyone. But joining Stafford in the exodus out of Detroit was almost all of their wide receivers. Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, Danny Amendola gone. In Brashard Perryman, Tyrell Williams, and 4th-round rookie pick Amon-Ra St. Brown. Geronimo Allison opted out last season, so he'll be back. And then you have 5th-round pick Quentin Cephas as really the only guy coming back. I mean, so what's that mean? It's going to be TJ Hawkinson's offense. He'll be the focal point of the passing game, and Goff loves throwing to his tight ends. 22% of his passes to tight ends in 2 seasons in LA, and he had Higbee and Everett. The Lions defense was a disaster last year. They set franchise records for most points allowed, yards allowed, ranked last in quarterback pressures. They barely blitzed. It was very strange. I don't know what, but I have no idea what Patricia was doing. And now we won't need to ever wonder what Patricia's doing ever again. Defensive end Trey Flowers will be counted on to lead the defense. Okwara, 10 sacks last season. They acquire Michael Brockers from the Rams. This team does not have depth in the linebacking core. Okwara had 10 sacks last year. 31-year-old Jamie Collins will help lead the group. Last year's number 3 overall pick, Jeff Okudah, played 9 games before that core muscle injury ended the season. This year they drafted cornerback Ifeatu Melifonwu out of Syracuse in the 3rd round. They signed Quinton Dunbar and nickel corner Corn Elder in free agency and released Trufant and Justin Coleman. Tracy Walker will be utilized in the free safety role. Hopefully he will bounce back. Babano, how bad will the Detroit Lions be in 2021?
They'll be bad, but the betting markets are onto the fact that they expect this team to be bad. I mean, the win total is 5.5, and it's heavy juice. And the one thing that's going to save the Lions is now we're seeing more and more that the other teams in this division have their own issues and have their own flaws. And we're talking about a team that was 5-11 last year. You now expect them to be worse, or as that same win total, if not worse, this year. And they could be. For me, it's under or pass with this win total. But here's why I haven't bet it yet with Detroit. The reviews about how there's a cleansing of the player-coach relationship going on in Detroit is very real. They love Dan Campbell already. And the praise that players have for him is just, it's almost like a breath of fresh air. And hell, we could be Jimmy the Bag and Ian Cameron could get hired as the head coach. They would have loved it in Detroit after the Matt Patricia disaster. That's the bottom line there. But the bottom line is they've got some really high praise for Dan Campbell early on. And they're going to have to hope that they love the coach enough, and that's enough to push this team to performances on the field, because I still have my doubts. Jared Goff is one of those people that, it's like the guy with the buffet. You need the table set for you. You need all the plates of food out on the table. You can't cook anything yourself. That's basically Jared Goff. He needs an O-line that's good. He needs a receiving core that's deep. He needs everything to be good around him if he's going to succeed. Good play calling like he got with the Rams with Sean McVay. You don't have much of that here in Detroit. I don't trust Anthony Lynn now at all in that regard, putting Goff in the positions to succeed the way McVay did. I think this is one of the worst receiving cores in the NFL this year. I mean, Tyrell Williams and a first-round bust who can't stay healthy, and Brashad Perriman might be your top 2 receivers. You got to be kidding me. I mean, you must be kidding me coming into this year with that kind of receiving core. Green Bay is looking at that receiving core and saying, we'll take ours over you guys. I mean, that's really how bad it is. How bad it could be for Detroit. There's not a lot of weapons out there. I like DeAndre Swift a lot. I do like the O-line. You're right. The O-line, shockingly, could be pretty solid for this group. They have a good tackle duo when you look at Taylor Decker. They draft Penei Sewell as well. That could be a really good duo of tackles there. And look, Penei Sewell, Taylor Decker was good enough. It's just a question of who's going to play the left tackle spot, who's going to play the right tackle spot. But you got 2 good players right there. Frank Ragnow, very good starting center, and he'll help along the interior. So that O-line's could be solid, and that's going to help Goff, believe it or not. But still questions about the receiving core overall, too. I just think that's just not receivers I trust to gain separation from really good defensive backs. That remains to be seen. The defense was a sieve last year. I think there's reasons to think it'll be markedly better, but I don't know if they're going to go from bad to good. I think bad to below average or mediocre at absolute best is probably the ceiling for the improvement for this Lions defense. I mean, Jamie Collins is good. They bring in Alex Anzalone from the Saints. You look at it, they signed Michael Brockers, but here's the issue. He's been a good player. He's had a great career. He's now in his 30s. He's off probably his worst year ever. It's almost like the guy did you get him before or after the expiry date? And they might have got Michael Brockers after the expiry date. So I worry about that. I like that they brought in Quinton Dunbar on this. They had to do something in that secondary. It was awful last year. They bring in Quinton Dunbar, Jeff Okudah, you got to hope he stays healthy this year. He's only going to be in his second year. He's got talent there. He didn't play well when he was on the field, but he wasn't on the field enough to truly evaluate him. You just got to hope he stays healthy this year and he's better, but still a lot of question marks in terms of this defense overall. The safety position looks absolutely hideous coming into the year. The linebacking core, we'll have to wait and see on that, but there's still a lot of unproven commodities at that position. I still think they're going to give up points, this Detroit team. And if you look at the preseason, the Buffalo and Pittsburgh preseason games, don't go crazy because it's preseason, but it still must be said. The Bills starting offense and the Steelers starting offense, they just went right down the field like nothing against this Lions defense. Too easy. And I worry about that for the Lions. If this O-line's solid, though, and Goff cannot make mistakes, and they get something from these receivers, which is still a question mark, then maybe Detroit can cover some spreads as big dogs, get through the back door. And I do think they'll play some overs early in the year from a game total standpoint. As far as the win total, under is the lean, but 5.5 is a fair number, and I'm not laying minus 200 on that.
There you have it, the NFC North. Is there a best bet in a futures angle here within the division for you?
If I had to pick one, there's not a future I love in this division, but by far the strongest futures bet that I have in this division, whether it's conference division odds or win total, it's Minnesota under 8.5.
I like it. Vikings under 8.5. There you have the NFC North. This year, we have shows every Tuesday night, opening line shows where we break down every single game on the card. And then Sundays, a kickoff show with a Pub Hub. We're going to have revolving guests. We're very excited about our Sunday kickoff show that will be on all year long. Thank you guys so much for watching this show. Please hit the like and the subscribe button for us. But thank you so much for your support. On behalf of Babano, myself, and everybody at Pub Sports Radio, thank you. And let's have ourselves a big, big NFL season.